What you just saw come out of that ground grew from a handful of tubers no larger than your thumb. No fertilizer schedule, no pest spray, no irrigation system, no replanting next spring. The gardener who grew that harvest is about to do something that sounds almost careless. Tonight, they will simply leave several tubers in the soil. No special storage, no protection. And next year, that same patch of ground will produce another harvest. And the year after that, and the year after that again. Those towering plants, 10 feet tall and covered in yellow blooms, are the source of the harvest you just saw. The plant is called Jerusalem artichoke. Americans often know it by another name, sunchoke. And without serious competition, it may be the most productive perennial vegetable that an American gardener can grow. From a patch of soil just 3 feet by 3 feet, this plant can produce 20 to 40 pounds of food in a single season. It survives winters from zone 3 to zone 9. It tolerates poor soil. It tolerates partial shade. It grows where many traditional vegetable crops struggle. And when winter arrives, the harvest does not demand a cellar or refrigeration. The tubers simply store themselves in the ground, waiting for you to dig them whenever you need them. Yet despite all of this, almost nobody grows it. Today that changes. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this plant is extraordinary, how to grow it correctly in an American garden, and how to prepare it in the kitchen using a method that eliminates the single complaint most people have about it. But before we get into the growing system, there is one question that matters. Have you ever grown or even eaten a Jerusalem artichoke? Some people know it well, some have tried it once. And many gardeners have never heard of it until this moment. Drop your answer in the comments, yes, no, or never heard of it. Because once you see the production numbers behind this plant, the way you think about garden space may change completely. And this is where the numbers start to get interesting. To understand why Jerusalem artichokes deserve your attention, you have to start with the numbers. Plant a single tuber in spring, and by autumn that plant typically produces 15 to 20 new tubers underground. From a 3 by 3 foot patch planted with about 10 starter tubers, a typical American home gardener can expect to harvest somewhere between 20 and 40 pounds. That is an extraordinary amount of food from a space smaller than a bathroom floor. For comparison, the same 9 square feet planted with potatoes usually produces 8 to 12 pounds under good conditions. Jerusalem artichoke can produce 2 to 3 times the yield from the same ground, while demanding far less management throughout the season. But production is only part of the story. The plant's scientific name is Helianthus tuberosus, and nutritionally it stands apart from most vegetables in one important way. Jerusalem artichokes contain extremely high levels of inulin. Inulin is a prebiotic fiber, a type of carbohydrate that human digestion does not fully break down, but beneficial gut bacteria thrive on. According to USDA Food Data Central, Jerusalem artichokes contain roughly 31 to 37% inulin by dry weight. That is the highest concentration of any commonly available vegetable. Alongside that fiber content, they also provide meaningful levels of minerals. A single cup delivers approximately 28% of daily iron, about 14% potassium, and around 15% thiamine, along with smaller but useful amounts of phosphorus and copper. Calorie density sits at roughly 73 calories per 100 grams, placing it between a potato and a carrot. In other words, it is filling enough to function as a real staple food, not just a side vegetable. The flavor surprises most people the first time they try it. Despite the name, Jerusalem artichokes do not taste like artichokes. The word artichoke actually comes from a historical linguistic mistake, an Italian phrase that slowly evolved into the English name. The flavor itself is closer to water chestnut combined with sunflower seed, with a mild natural sweetness. With a mild natural sweetness that becomes stronger after the plant experiences frost. Roasted, that sweetness caramelizes into a deep nutty flavor. Raw, the tubers remain crisp and refreshing, adding a crunch to salads that very few vegetables can match. And then there is the perennial advantage. Unlike potatoes, Jerusalem artichokes do not require replanting every year. Leave even a few tubers behind in the soil after harvest, something that happens almost automatically, and the patch regenerates itself the following spring. Once established, it becomes a plant that continues producing with almost no effort from the gardener. But to get those results consistently, one decision matters more than most people realize. Now let's move into the next stage. Before planting Jerusalem artichokes, there's one decision that matters more than most gardeners realize: the variety you choose. Wild-type sunchokes found in stores are often knobbly and difficult to clean. Improved name varieties, however, offer smoother skins and easier handling. Stampede is the earliest maturing variety in North America, ready in just 70 to 80 days, making it the safest choice for colder climates. For flavor, chefs prefer Fuseau, a French heirloom with long, smooth tubers that require far less scrubbing than traditional types. Then there's Red Fuseau, prized for its striking color that stays vibrant even when roasted, a favorite for presentation. But remember, once planted, this crop has one trait that surprises every grower. It spreads, and that's where the strategy begins. Jerusalem artichoke is one of the most adaptable vegetables a gardener can grow. It tolerates poor soil, partial shade, dry conditions, and a wide range of climates, from USDA Zone 3 through Zone 9. This adaptability is one of its greatest advantages. but it also creates the plant's single management challenge. The main challenge is that the Jerusalem artichoke spreads vigorously. Any small tuber fragment left behind in the soil, something that happens almost every time you harvest, can sprout the following spring. Over several seasons, a casually planted patch can expand outward and slowly take over nearby garden space. For some gardeners, this becomes a problem. For others, it becomes an asset. The key is making a deliberate decision about containment before the first tuber goes into the ground. The most effective long-term solution is a dedicated bed with a physical barrier. A raised bed with solid sidewalls extending 12 to 18 inches into the soil prevents the underground tubers from spreading sideways. Inside that contained space, the plants can produce freely. Each autumn you harvest within the boundary and intentionally leave a few tubers behind for the following year's crop. A second option is large container planting. Jerusalem artichokes grow surprisingly well in containers as long as the volume is sufficient. A 25 to 30 gallon container, such as a large fabric pot, stock tank, or repurposed IBC tote, can produce a harvest of 8 to 12 pounds while eliminating any risk of spreading into surrounding beds. At the end of the season, the container can be emptied, harvested, and replanted. The third strategy is simply giving the plant its own section of the garden. If space allows, Jerusalem artichokes can occupy a permanent area where their natural expansion is acceptable. Many gardeners plant them along fences, at the back of large gardens, or along property edges, where their 10-foot height and sunflower-like flowers create both food and a seasonal privacy screen. The one approach that usually fails is casual planting. Placing a few tubers along the edge of a vegetable bed and assuming they will stay contained rarely works. Over time, the colony expands, and eventually it begins appearing where it was never intended to grow. A small amount of planning at the beginning prevents that problem entirely. Because once the site is chosen, the next step is remarkably simple. And this is where Jerusalem artichokes start to reveal just how little work they actually require. Jerusalem artichokes are famous for their resilience growing in almost any soil. But for a truly massive harvest, preparation is key. The secret lies in soil quality. Before planting, work 2 to 3 inches of aged compost into the top 8 inches of your soil to improve structure and drainage. Avoid fresh manure, which can cause tubers to fork and twist. Aged compost provides all the nutrients needed without the distortion. For an extra boost, add bone meal. 1 handful per square foot introduces phosphorus, supporting the root development essential for heavy yields. Plant your tubers 4 to 6 inches deep and 18 inches apart. This spacing gives each cluster enough room to expand freely underground. With the right start, these hardy plants will soon push through the soil, ready to grow with very little maintenance. Once Jerusalem artichokes are established and actively growing, the list of tasks becomes remarkably short. Compared with most vegetable crops, this plant requires very little attention during the growing season. The first month after emergence is the only period when management matters. During these early weeks, consistent moisture helps the plant establish a strong root system. Regular watering during the first 4 weeks of growth allows roots to push deeper into the soil, creating the foundation for the large tuber harvest that develops later in the season. After that establishment period, the plant becomes surprisingly resilient. Jerusalem artichokes develop a deep root system capable of accessing moisture well below the surface. In most climates, natural rainfall provides everything the plant needs. Supplemental watering becomes necessary only during extended drought conditions, typically 3 weeks or more without rainfall, particularly in very sandy soils. A second step that dramatically improves results is mulching. When plants reach roughly 12 inches tall, apply a layer of mulch around the base. 3 to 4 inches of straw, shredded leaves, or wood chips helps retain soil moisture through the heat of summer. Mulch also suppresses weeds during the early growth stage, before the plants develop their full canopy. Once the plants reach full height, that canopy provides most of the weed suppression naturally. By midsummer, Jerusalem artichokes often reach impressive heights. Mature plants commonly grow 10 to 12 feet tall, creating a dense vertical wall of foliage. For gardens with nearby crops that depend on full sunlight, this height can create significant shade. Gardeners have a simple choice. If the plants are growing near light-sensitive crops, cutting them back to 6 to 8 feet tall in midsummer prevents shading and reduces wind damage during storms. Importantly, trimming the height does not reduce tuber production. The cut stems can be laid down around the base of the plants and used as additional mulch. By late summer, the plants produce bright yellow flowers that closely resemble small sunflowers. These blooms appear from August through October, and they play an important ecological role in the garden. At this point in the season, many earlier flowers have already finished blooming. Jerusalem artichokes provide a late-season nectar source for pollinators, including native bees, honeybees, and migrating monarch butterflies. As autumn arrives, the visible part of the plant begins to fade, but underground, something far more important is waiting, because this crop has a harvest system unlike almost any other vegetable, and this is where Jerusalem artichokes become truly different. Harvest season for Jerusalem artichokes usually begins in late October and can continue deep into winter, depending on climate. This is one of the most important practical advantages of the crop. Unlike many vegetables, Jerusalem artichokes do not have a strict harvest deadline. Potatoes, for example, must be dug before prolonged freezing damages them underground. Jerusalem artichokes behave differently. They store perfectly in the soil through multiple hard frosts. In fact, frost exposure actually improves them. Inside the tubers is a carbohydrate called inulin. When the plant experiences repeated freezing temperatures, some of that inulin gradually converts into fructose, a natural sugar. This biological change produces two important effects. First, the tubers become noticeably sweeter in flavor. Second, the conversion reduces the digestive discomfort that some people experience when eating large amounts of raw inulin. A Jerusalem artichoke harvested in January after several hard frosts often tastes significantly sweeter and milder than one harvested immediately in autumn. When harvest time arrives, the technique matters. Use a garden fork rather than a spade. Tubers tend to spread further away from the plant stem than most gardeners expect. A fork allows you to loosen the surrounding soil gently without cutting directly through the tubers. Start by loosening soil in roughly a 12-inch radius around each plant. Lift the entire clump, shake off loose soil, and gather all visible tubers. Even with careful digging, some will remain behind in the ground, and that is exactly what ensures next year's crop. Before sending the harvest to the kitchen, set aside a few tubers for planting stock. Choose 8 to 10 of the healthiest tubers from the most productive plants. Look for smooth skin and several visible growth buds. Store these in slightly damp sand, peat, or potting mix in a cool location around 35 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. These become the next season's planting material. Selecting from your best plants each year gradually improves the productivity of your entire patch. For gardeners in colder climates, especially zones 3 and 4, where soil eventually freezes solid, harvesting everything before the ground hardens may be necessary. In that case, tubers store well indoors, placed in boxes of slightly damp sand or sawdust, and kept in a cool garage or basement around 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. They can maintain quality for 4 to 5 months. But in milder climates, the simplest storage method is still the best. Leave them exactly where they grew. The soil itself becomes the storage system. And when you dig them in the middle of winter, they are often sweeter than the day they were harvested. But how you prepare them in the kitchen matters just as much as how you grow them. Because the cooking method determines whether someone who tries this vegetable once becomes a lifelong grower. And this is where most people discover what Jerusalem artichokes can really do. Stay tuned for the final chapter, where we unlock the culinary secrets of the sunchoke. This is the stage where many people make their first mistake with Jerusalem artichokes. They cook them like potatoes. That approach rarely produces the best results. Jerusalem artichokes behave differently in the kitchen. Their natural sweetness and unique texture respond best to cooking methods that emphasize caramelization and flavor concentration. The simplest and most reliable method is roasting. Begin by scrubbing the tubers thoroughly. Peeling is not necessary. The skin becomes crisp during roasting and contains valuable nutrients. Cut the tubers into roughly 1-inch pieces or have smaller ones lengthwise. Toss them with olive oil, salt, black pepper, and herbs such as thyme or rosemary. Spread them across a sheet pan in a single layer. Roast in a 425 degree Fahrenheit oven for about 30 to 35 minutes, turning once halfway through. As they cook, something remarkable happens. The natural sugars begin to caramelize. Edges turn deep golden brown. And the aroma shifts from earthy to rich and nutty. The finished result surprises almost everyone the first time they taste it. Roasted Jerusalem artichokes develop a flavor that is both sweet and savory, with a nutty complexity that ordinary roasted potatoes rarely achieve. Many people describe the taste as something between sunflower seeds and roasted chestnuts. For skeptical first-time eaters, this preparation is usually the turning point. It is the moment when the vegetable stops being an experiment and becomes something worth growing every year. But roasting is only one way to use the harvest. In professional kitchens across the United States, Jerusalem artichokes appear most often in another form entirely, a preparation that highlights their flavor in a completely different way. And this is where the texture becomes just as important as the taste. In professional kitchens, the preparation most often associated with Jerusalem artichokes is soup. This is the dish that introduced the vegetable to many American restaurant menus over the past 2 decades. And the reason is simple. When cooked and blended, Jerusalem artichokes develop a texture that is remarkably smooth and silky, smoother than most potato-based soups, yet still rich and satisfying. The basic method is straightforward. Start by sautéing 1 diced onion and 2 cloves of garlic in butter until they become soft and fragrant. Then add about 2 pounds of chopped Jerusalem artichokes. Cover them with chicken or vegetable stock, leaving roughly 1 inch of liquid above the vegetables. Allow the mixture to simmer for 20 to 25 minutes until the tubers become completely tender. At that point, blend the soup until perfectly smooth. Season with salt and white pepper, but there is one small technique that dramatically improves the final flavor. Add a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. The vinegar brightens the entire dish. It balances the natural sweetness of the tubers and brings the flavor into sharp focus. Many recipes omit this step, but chefs rarely do. That small addition is often the difference between a good soup and a memorable one. But Jerusalem artichokes do not always need to be cooked. Raw preparation reveals a completely different side of the vegetable. When sliced thinly, the tubers remain crisp and refreshing, with a clean flavor that many people compare to freshwater chestnuts. The texture adds a distinctive crunch to salads that few other vegetables can match. For a simple salad, slice the tubers thinly and toss them immediately with lemon juice to prevent browning. Then combine them with arugula, toasted walnuts, and shaved parmesan. A light lemon Dijon vinaigrette ties the flavors together. The mild sweetness of the raw tubers pairs beautifully with peppery greens and sharp cheeses. And when eaten raw, Jerusalem artichokes deliver their full prebiotic fiber content, making them especially valuable for digestive health. But there is still one final preparation method that solves the single complaint most people have about this vegetable. And once you understand that method, the last barrier to growing Jerusalem artichokes disappears. There is one complaint that follows Jerusalem artichokes everywhere on the internet: digestive discomfort. Some people even jokingly call them fartichokes. The reason is biological. Jerusalem artichokes contain very high levels of inulin, a type of carbohydrate that human digestive enzymes cannot fully break down in the small intestine. Instead, inulin passes into the large intestine where gut bacteria ferment it. That fermentation produces gas as a natural byproduct. For people with sensitive digestive systems, eating large amounts of raw sunchokes can sometimes lead to uncomfortable results. But there is a simple solution: fermentation. Fermenting Jerusalem artichokes before eating them converts a significant portion of the inulin into simpler sugars. The body absorbs these earlier in the digestive process. The result is dramatically reduced gas production. At the same time, fermentation introduces beneficial bacteria that support gut health in their own right. The process is surprisingly simple. Start with about 2 pounds of thinly sliced tubers. Add 1 tablespoon of non-iodized salt. Iodized salt can interfere with fermentation, so plain sea salt or pickling salt works best. Then add flavor components. Typically 4 to 5 cloves of sliced garlic and 1 teaspoon of fresh grated ginger. And optional chili flakes for heat. Mix everything thoroughly. Within 15 minutes, the salt will begin drawing moisture out. Pack the mixture tightly into a clean mason jar, pressing down firmly. The natural liquid released by the salt should rise above the level of the vegetables. If it does not, add a small amount of 2% brine, about 1 teaspoon of salt per cup of water, until everything is fully submerged. Place a small weight on top to keep the slices below the liquid surface. Allow the jar to ferment at room temperature, roughly 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 to 5 days. Check it daily. Press the contents down gently and taste beginning on the 3rd day. Once the flavor becomes pleasantly sour and tangy, seal the jar. Move it to the refrigerator. The finished fermented sunchokes develop a bright, complex flavor. They can be eaten as a side dish, added to salads, or used as a condiment. They are usually far easier on the digestive system. For many people, this simple method removes the only real drawback of the crop, which leaves one final question. If a vegetable can produce year after year, survive harsh winters, and out-yield potatoes, why is it still missing from most backyard gardens? And that is where this story comes full circle. There are very few crops that combine this many advantages. Jerusalem artichoke produces perennial harvests once established. It grows from USDA Zone 3 through 9, tolerating poor soil and drought while producing triple the yield of potatoes. Yet it's rare, not because it's hard to grow, but because it doesn't fit the modern commercial food system. Their irregular shapes don't stack in displays, and they bruise easily during shipping, making them inconvenient for industrial supply chains. But for home gardeners, this plant offers effortless abundance, feeding both people and pollinators year after year. What's your hardiness zone? And after seeing its potential, are you planning to plant Jerusalem artichokes this season? The most productive crop in your future garden may simply be the one you haven't planted yet. Start with the sunchoke.